Hello, I'm Richard Whiteley and welcome aboard. In the form of this video, we're going to take a trip together during which you will learn how to create extraordinary loyalty with your customers. So sit back and enjoy the trip. You know, if you were running an airlines and I were a passenger and put down this flip-down tray and I saw coffee stains on it, I would think that your engines aren't maintained. This is the kind of tip and idea we'll be sharing during this video. Well, we're on our way in this video, and I thought it would be appropriate to start with what our objectives are. And there are really three things we want to accomplish here. The first one is to understand the difference between companies that are really excelling in creating extraordinary value for their customers and companies that aren't. The second one is to identify specific strategies that these companies use to create loyalty that sets them apart from their competitors. And the third part will be to allow you to apply these strategies to your company. Now, in order to help you do this, we've included in the video materials specific guidelines on how you can use a self-assessment questionnaire. This questionnaire has 5 questions for each of 5 strategies which we're going to describe. And we encourage you to use this in your company so that you can take the concepts that we're presenting and translate them to your own unique situation. Now, these 5 strategies are as follows. The first one is how to create a laser beam focus, to really focus your company. The second is how to bring the customer alive in your company so that not only the people in the front end of your organization that deal with customers on a daily basis, but the people in the back end are able to appreciate what's important to the customers and have a feel for how they're reacting to the services and products they're getting from your organization. The third strategy is how to improve organizational teamwork. More and more today, an organization simply cannot succeed without having exceptional teamwork. The fourth strategy is how to create lasting customer enthusiasm. We've got to go beyond satisfaction now and create enthusiastic customers. And the fifth strategy is about contact leadership. The glue that holds it all together is the effectiveness of the leader. This is the key success factor. Now, it's important to understand where these 5 strategies come from. And they come from the research that we did in creating my last book, Customer-Centered Growth. And in creating that book, we talked to over 200 organizations in 6 different continents to discover what it was that made them successful. And we were able to derive from that research the 5 strategies that I just mentioned. So it's reasonable to ask, why is this important? Why should we even worry about these 5 strategies? Well, let me show you 2 charts that will answer that question. The first one has to do with not just having very satisfied customers, but having enthusiastic customers. And if you look at this chart, what you'll see is that on a scale of 1 to 5 on the bottom is the typical customer ratings when you send questionnaires to your customers. 5 being very satisfied, 1 being extremely dissatisfied. If you look at the left-hand vertical, you'll see that it's about loyalty. 100% means 100% of the customers you're doing business with are rebuying from you. What a wonderful situation that is. If you look in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see the word apostle. Those are customers who love you so much, they're going to actually help you go out and create new customers. And if you look at the lower left-hand corner, where there's low loyalty, you'll see the word terrorist, and these are the customers who are wanting to get even, and they will consume the profitability of 5 apostles or 5 very happy customers. If you look at that line and see how it slopes, and you look at number 5 rating and number 4 rating, what you'll see is a dramatic drop in loyalty. If your customers simply move from a 5 to a 4 rating, their loyalty drops from 100 to below 40%. That's quite dramatic. Now the next chart will show you why it's all worth it. What will happen if you can get loyalty at 100%, and what will happen if you can get your customers to rate you at a 5 instead of a 4, 3, or 2, or 1? Fred Reichel did this research, and he looked at a number of different industries and companies in those industries, and the question he asked is, what would be the impact on profitability if you could just keep 5%, only 5% of your customers from leaving who would otherwise be leaving? If you could just retain that 5%. And the dramatic result, as you can see from this chart, is that it goes from 90% improvement on the bottom line to 25% improvement. Very dramatic results. So, getting customer enthusiasm is good business because it builds growth and it builds profitability. Well, now let's look at the first strategy, how to create a laser beam focus. As I mentioned, creating a laser beam focus, or focusing your organization, is very critical to take all of its assets and focus them on the critical success factors that will enable you to create customer loyalty. Andy Grove, the CEO of Intel, once said, "You have to understand what it is that you do better than anybody else and mercilessly focus your efforts on it." He was talking about focus, and that's why Intel is so successful. To help you focus, I'm going to present what is called the focusing framework. This framework will help you focus your assets on the critical accounts, the critical markets, the critical products that will have the greatest payoff for you. The way this grid will work is there are things that you do well and things that you do not do well as an organization, and it's very important to know what those are. And then there are things that your customers value and there are things that your customers do not value, and that's equally important to know. So, if you are not doing something well that your customers don't value, it's obvious you should stop doing it. But I'm amazed at how many companies today continue to do things they don't do well that customers don't value. Now, if there are things that you do well that customers do not value, then you also have to stop. It doesn't matter how well you do it. If it's not valued, it won't sell. So you either stop or retarget and refocus and find another customer group that would value it. If there are things that you do not do well that the customer does value, that's when you have to consider something like outsourcing or finding somebody who does do it well, partner with them, and present it to your customer. And of course, the last one is things that you do well that your customers value, then that's really your home. That's your home base. That's where your power and your profitability, and that is where you're going to generate your loyalty. Now, see if I can give you an example. Let's think of a company that doesn't do something well that customers don't value. And for this example, I would use a transportation company called Greyhound. Now, Greyhound is a company in the United States. It's a bus company. And they decided to improve their service by looking at the airlines, finding out what the airlines do that the bus transportation doesn't do, their competitors. And they said, what it is automated ticketing and reservation system. Well, what a great idea. And the people on Wall Street who were evaluating Greyhound, when they heard this, they thought it was terrific. The stock went up, but they only had two problems. One is they didn't do it very well. They ended up with a system that took 5 minutes to create a ticket, and of course the people who were the ticket agents started using the manual system again right away. It failed. And the other thing was that customers didn't value it. When they actually went out and talked to their customers, they found that the average customer who rides a bus in the United States earns $17,000 a year, does not have a credit card, and listen to this, does not make a reservation. This person just goes to the bus depot and waits for the bus. Notice that they did the customer research after they made the product innovation, and it cost them a lot of money. Think of a company now that does something well that customers don't value. The name Smith Corona comes up. Smith Corona makes typewriters. They make the best typewriters in the world. But I'll bet you people watching this videotape aren't using typewriters today. You're probably doing your work on computers. So in spite of the fact that they make the best typewriter in the world today, nobody is using it. Now, how about a company that doesn't do something well that customers value? That would be Nike. Now, what does Nike really do well? We all know that they are the great promoters. They have created that Nike swoosh and made it so famous, it's almost up there with Mickey Mouse and Coca-Cola as a brand identity. But what they don't do well is manufacture. And that's why they outsource all of their product development and product manufacturing. No Nike employee will be doing that manufacturing. Now that brings us to what you do well that companies do value, and I think a good example here would be McDonald's. McDonald's knows what their customers want, and they give it to them, and they do it very well. So that's how the focusing framework would work. There's a four-step process for creating a laser beam focus. The first one is identify which customers you really want. Now, this is very important. You cannot become a customer-centered organization. You cannot create customer delight unless and until you focus on the customers you want. And I'm amazed today at how many companies still argue over who the real customer is. The second one is identify what these customers, the ones you've targeted, really need. In other words, what's really important to them. Then discover, number three, discover your laser beam focus and focus in on those needs and requirements. Forget everything else. Focus on those needs and requirements. And number four, create an organization-wide, we say, obsession with this focus. In other words, communicate it to everybody in your company so they know how to focus in their jobs, and when everybody is focused, then the results that you're seeking will occur. You know, one of the questions that I get asked a lot is, how do I bring the voice of the customer in my company? I believe this customer stuff, but I can't get my people to believe it. And that takes us to the second strategy, which is how to bring the customer alive in your company. John McLaughlin, who is in service administration at Toyota, said, virtually everybody collects a lot of data. We could fill rooms with computer reports that nobody reads. And I found this to be true as I go around the world talking to audiences. I ask them, raise your hand if you receive reports you don't read or use. And at least 90% of the hands go up immediately. In other words, we're creating a lot of reports that we're not using, and very few of these reports have to do anything to do with the customer. Now, we call this bringing the voice of the customer into the organization, hardwiring the voice. You see that building over there? In every one of those floors, in every one of those rooms, there's some kind of a sensor or indicator that would sound an alarm if there were a fire in that room. It would sense the difference in heat or the gases, and it would send alarm to a central box in that building, probably down in the lower part of that building. When that box in the central area of the building received the alarm, it would immediately call the fire department. In other words, nobody had to do anything. It was all automatic. We call that hardwiring. So it's a guaranteed system. All it has to do is that sensor go off and the fire department's on its way. Now, there's an alternative here, and the alternative is to buy one of those little portable battery-operated smoke detectors that you can put on your ceiling yourself. While these may be effective, there's two problems. First problem, they're battery operated and the battery could go dead. Second problem, have you ever stopped to think that you have to be where the fire is so that you can call the fire department? That's not hardwired. There's a disconnect between the problem and getting the help. And that's what we see companies have been doing. In trying to bring the voice of the customer in, it's been disconnected from their own people. Now, there are 4 steps to hardwiring the voice of the customer. And the first one is create a listening strategy. Now, this is often a surprise to executives when I say create a listening strategy. Actually being thoughtful about how you are going to go out and get information from and listen to your customers. That's the listening strategy. The second is to collect, organize, and most importantly, display information. That becomes very important as well, particularly the display part. Think about putting charts of your customer satisfaction ratings all around your organization, putting it on your internal communications network, so that everybody at every time knows how we're doing with our customers. Not only how we're doing in general, but how we did even yesterday. The third part is to create a dynamic scorecard. Now, what's a dynamic scorecard? Most companies manage themselves by profit, by the bottom line, or by earnings per share. We say, how are you doing? We say, our earnings per share are up. But have you ever stopped to think that earnings per share and profit is a lagging indicator? What this means is it's the last thing that you can possibly create. That's why we call it the bottom line. It's not at the beginning, it's at the end. So if you want to be effective in managing your organization and creating customer delight, you have to look upstream from that bottom line and find out what are the variables, what are the leading indicators that actually influence the bottom line. Donald Peterson, when he was the chairman of Ford Motor Company, once said, I wouldn't play a very important tennis match with one eye on the scoreboard. In other words, he was saying, I have to be in the match. The score is only an indicator of how I've done. Profit is only an indicator of how you've done. Now, don't misunderstand me. Profit's important for you profit-oriented organizations. But what's important is to identify the leading indicators, and there are three. The first one, not surprisingly, is the voice of the customer. If you have your hand on the pulse of the customer and you monitor how you're doing, you will find that if your customer satisfaction takes a dip, somewhere down the road, your profitability will take a dip as well. So, first of all is the voice of the customer. That's number one leading indicator. Second leading indicator, voice of your employees. Your people have to be ready, resourced, trained, and motivated to do what's right for the customer. How do you know whether they are or not? How are you listening to their voice? The third leading indicator is the voice of quality, or the voice of your processes. In other words, how robust, how effective are the processes that produce the results in the form of products and services that your customers ultimately evaluate. Three leading indicators: voice of the customer, voice of the employees, and voice of your quality or your processes. Those leading indicators will generate the profitability that you're looking for. Now let me give you an example of an organization that has hardwired the voice of the customer, and that's MBNA. MBNA is a credit card company, and by any industry standard, they're excellent. They're right up there with MasterCard and the others. Now, the example of hardwiring is very simple. They have gone to their customers and identified the 16 variables that are most important to them. And in their organization in Newark, Delaware, in the United States, in their home office building, they have a very big, what we would call tote board, or a way of calculating how they're doing on each of those 16 variables every day. It's visible. So they list the 16 variables, and then they indicate how the rating is from their customers on that very day. And then what they do is they roll up the averages into a customer satisfaction index. And for every day that that index is 96 or above, 96% or above, they then contribute money to their employees, which is held to the end of the quarter and then distributed to the employees. Now that's hardwired. First, they've gone to their customers, they've identified the 16 variables that are most important, they have created visual management by putting it on a board that every single employee goes by every day when they come and leave work, and then they measure every day how they're doing on those variables, roll it up into an average, and pay employees based on how well they've done. Hardwired. You could even say that the customers are paying the employees. Well, I'd like to end this segment with a quotation from Katrine Sporel. Katrine is the CEO of two boroughs or cities outside of London, Basingstoke and Dean. She is the chief executive. She is a public servant, and incidentally, for those of you who are not running organizations that are for-profit companies, I would say these concepts work equally as well. for those of you in the government or in nonprofit organizations, these concepts will work because you too have customers. Well, Catherine Sporl said this. It's very simple. The dialogue is only real if something happens as a consequence. So if you're going to be going out and talking to your customers and asking what they think, use that information, hardwire it, drive it back into the organization, and bring the customer alive in your company. You know, it's simply impossible to succeed in business today in the old hierarchical organization. And the reason is that we have to rely so much on other people. We have to begin to work effectively across the organization. And that is the third strategy, and that is how to improve organizational teamwork. Recently, when we wrote the book, we observed in many companies that there are just simply too many teams. In fact, research says that in only 15% of the companies, the large organizations that are using teams aggressively, are those teams really having an impact in improving productivity. In most cases, the teams are just being a waste. We coined a phrase for that. It's like a disease that we would call teamitis. Rather, what an organization needs to have is what we call universal collaboration. Universal collaboration is when everyone's attitude and competence leads him or her to behave in a team-oriented manner, whether or not he or she is on a team at that particular moment. In our research, we had the opportunity to study effective teams and what really made them work. And part of this research took us to interview team leaders of really outstanding teams. In other words, people who, it didn't matter what team they were put in charge of, that team really did well. One of the team leaders said this, and he was talking about this idea of too many teams. He said, a team is like having a baby tiger given to you at Christmas. It does a wonderful job of keeping the mice away for about 12 months, and then it starts to eat your kids. In other words, teams have gotten out of control. Jack Welch once was quoted as saying and thinking about a small company soul in a large company body. That's really a profound quotation. And what he meant by that is that as an organization gets bigger and bigger and bigger, it becomes very important to keep that small company soul, the heart of the small company in that organization. In other words, what he really was saying was, as we get bigger, we want people to continue to think and act like entrepreneurs, like they're part of a small company. One of the keys to creating universal collaboration is to follow what we call the 7 pillars of universal collaboration. And I'm going to describe each of those now. The first pillar is to create an overarching purpose, a vision, a goal. In the last 5 or 6 years, one of the business tools that executives have been using most is the vision creating process. And in Latin America, many organizations I've discovered don't have a vision. They say that people are motivated in reverse order by money, by a really good leader. In other words, a really good leader will get more out of a person than just his or her paycheck. And they're most motivated by a cause, even more than a good leader, a cause. People will die for a cause. What is the cause of your organization? You have your pay systems, you have your leaders. What's your cause? And that is the vision. And that's why it can be beneficial, if not even important, to create this overarching purpose. It stimulates collaboration because I, as I serve the purpose of our company, will give up some of my power and collaborate with you. A good example of a vision was that was used by Walt Disney when he created the theme parks. His vision was quite simple. It was this: to create a place where we can all be kids. Let's look at the second of these pillars, and that is people involvement. People, when they're involved, get motivated. I am much more committed to executing a plan that I've helped create than simply executing your plan. So involving people is becoming more and more important. People want meaning in their work. They want to have a say. The number one reason for turnover of frontline service providers is simple. They say, nobody ever asked me what I think. And here I am, day to day, handling the problems that are coming out in the front line, and nobody even asked me what I think about how to solve them. A good example of people involvement was with Delta Airlines, one of our clients several years ago. And they wanted to understand how they could improve their service because their service had slipped. They created 1,000 what they called ambassadors, 1,000 ambassadors to their own organization. And these people were picked because they were respected performers and they were customer focused. And then these people went and each of them interviewed about 8 other employees at Delta Airlines. And they came back with a research report from their own organization that was done by people in their own organization. And that created incredible involvement. So when they decided what action plan to execute to improve service, everybody was on board. The third pillar is the internal customer process. Your internal customer is the person to whom you pass your work. It's that simply. You do work, you pass it to somebody. That's your internal customer. The problem in most organizations is we only think of the customer as being outside. And so it's the salespeople, it's the customer service people, it's the people on the telephone that get the training. When in fact, if you look at how a product or a service is created, usually it starts here inside the organization, and then it's passed to the next person, it's passed to the next person, it's passed to the next person, and then out it pops, and it's given to a customer. That customer then evaluates it. The problem is that if this person hasn't done the job, even though he or she never sees an external customer, that product or service is going to have a problem, and the external customer won't be happy. So the internal customer process becomes very important, and that is paying attention to the person to whom you pass your work and treating that person like a customer. The fourth pillar of universal collaboration is the development of collaboration skills. We have found that it is not a natural thing to learn how to collaborate because we are used to learning how to climb up the hierarchy and get our promotions. So in many cases, we do things that get in the way of collaboration. Wonderful story here comes from Ford of Australia. Ford of Australia a few years ago was going to be closed down by Ford in Detroit because it wasn't being productive. And the reason they weren't being productive is they were not collaborating. They did not have good teamwork. We went in and had a chance to work with them in my company, the Forum Corporation. We had a chance to work with them, and one of the things we did is we trained them to develop the 21 specific skills that are required to collaborate effectively. As a result of that, not only did Ford decide to keep the plant in Australia, they won their National Quality Award, and they were told by Ford that they had the best new product introduction of any of the plants worldwide in that particular year. The fifth pillar, positive team environments. Although we joke about having too many teams, I must say that you really cannot create extreme customer loyalty without the thoughtful deployment of teams to help them solve customer problems. For example, I'm sure that in your organizations you get complaints, and although they can seem like a nuisance, they're actually good to get. It's very important that your customers care enough about you to complain and tell you what's wrong, because they are telling you how to fix your own company. The question is, what happens to those complaints? For customer-centered organizations, they take these complaints, and not only do they solve the problem, but they look for the trends. And when they see one complaint is the most common, then they create a team to get together to find out what the root cause of that problem or complaint is and to solve it. That is an excellent use of teams. The sixth pillar of universal collaboration is organizational structure. Microsoft, for example, has decided that it really needs to be closer to its customer and create a better experience for its customers. As a result of many things they're doing, one of them is that they have reorganized around 5 customer groups. They've reorganized their entire company around 5 customer groups. And they made Steve Ballmer, who was in charge of the sales organization, president of the organization, the overall Microsoft. And the last and 7th pillar of universal collaboration is your infrastructure. Now, infrastructure really entails a lot, even how you organize your work. Well, for example, a wonderful story at Hewlett-Packard where they had a production line that went like this. It was a straight line, and people worked successfully on creating a product. And what they did is they bent it and made it into a horseshoe, like a U, so that the people at the beginning could see the work coming off at the end. And that simple reconfiguration of the production line improved quality because everybody, it wasn't like working and sending it away and never seeing it again. It was going to come back and everybody knew it. Also included in your infrastructure is your pay systems, your recognition and reward systems, your information technology systems. They are all a very important part of creating this customer loyalty. Ben Zander is the conductor of the Boston Philharmonic Orchestra. And several years ago, he made a recording of Mahler's 6th Symphony. It has since become known as the best ever recording of that symphony. Best ever recording. And he did it with a group of part-time musicians. Imagine that, part-time musicians creating world-class, beautiful music. I asked Ben Zander what the key to his success was, what the key to universal collaboration and creating organizational teamwork is. And he said this. He said, the key is to get the oboe player to listen to the flute player. I said, what? The key is to get the oboe player to listen to the flute player. Now, what that means is, he said, if the oboe player is playing too loud, great passion but too loud, he said, I can make him be quiet. With the audience at my back, I can scowl at him like that, and I can point my baton, and he'll be quiet, but he'll lose his passion. The key is for me to get him to listen to the flute player. And when he or she listens to the flute player, then this person will not lose the passion, but will moderate what he or she is doing. The key is to get the oboe player to listen to the flute player. I call this lateral listening. Listening across geographic and listening across functional barriers. A question for you. If your organization were an orchestra, what would it sound like? I'd like to tell you a story about a car company in the United States called Saturn. It's really quite an amazing company, and it's a wonderful example of how to design an organization that routinely and on purpose delights its customers. Saturn was started in about 1986, a division of General Motors, and it was designed to create an automobile that would compete with the small cars that were being imported from Japan and taking a lot of our market share in the United States. It was a very successful result because what they did is they went to consumers, buyers of automobiles, and said, what is it that's most important to you in buying a car? And then they designed an organization that gave it to them. Then they went to the dealers and they said, what's important to you in receiving and selling these automobiles? They listened to them and they designed an organization that gave it to them. So they had the car buyers and the dealers very happy. Now, how good were they? Well, here's the story. About 6 years after they began their organization, they invited the people who had bought their cars to come to their plant where they made the cars and meet the people who had manufactured those automobiles. Now, this is a little ridiculous. I know that in many parts of Latin America and certainly in the United States, the process of buying an automobile isn't really that much fun. In fact, it can be painful. It can be not enjoyable. And so here was a car company sending letters to the people who had bought their cars saying, your vacation time, your travel expense, come to our place, which is hard to get to, and meet the people who made your car. We'll do a plant tour, and we'll give you some Coca-Cola and hamburgers and do a little entertainment for you. Well, I don't know what you do with your vacations, but this wouldn't be the way I would normally think of spending mine. How many people actually went to that, what they called homecoming? 43,398. They came from every state in the United States, every province in Canada. They came from Alaska and from Hawaii, and 31 people came from Taiwan, where they also sell Saturns. This is an amazing story. Why would people do that? Because they had done such an extraordinary job. And this is what I want to talk about in strategy number 4. Strategy number 4 is about how to create lasting customer enthusiasm. You see, the reason Saturn was able to do this is that their number one value, the value that they all live by, is this: we are dedicated to creating customer enthusiasm. So when they sent out this invitation, over 43,000 people accepted it. Now, has this loyalty worked for them? You bet it has. When I wrote the book, Customer-Centered Growth, they were number 2 in sales. They had the lowest service cost of any car. They had the highest resale value when they sold the car again. They had the highest customer retention, and they had the highest sales per dealer. So everybody was winning: the car owner, the dealer, and of course, Saturn, the company. What a wonderful story to be an example of how, by designing an organization from the outside in, you can create loyalty and success. Let me now talk about what we call the branded customer experience. And the branded customer experience is creating an experience like Saturn or McDonald's, where it is very predictable and very positive. We use the term brand, and a brand is what your brand or what your logo or what your name stands for. For example, if I say Volvo, many of you will think automatically of security and safety. If I say Disney, you will probably think of fun and enjoyment. This is what a brand is. A brand is a promise, but it's a lot more than a promise. It's a promise that is kept, and that is a very important differentiator. If you talk to most advertising agencies or marketing consulting organizations, they will talk about product, price, promotion, packaging, positioning. These are the P's of marketing, and they're all right. But what they have to do with is creating the promise. And we are suggesting that in order to create lasting customer enthusiasm, there's 2 more P's, and they're very important. 1 is people, and 2 is processes. It is the people and the processes that enable you to keep your promise. Let me talk about each. And as an example, I'll use Disney. Many of you have probably been to the theme park, one of the theme parks that is owned by Disney, Disney World or Disneyland. And give you an example of a process. And this is something that you can do today, and I promise you that within a very short period of time, your customers are going to be feeling a better result from you, more enthusiasm. What Disney did is they said, what we want to do is create the best possible total experience for our customers. Now notice they didn't say, we're in the business of giving good rides and having people enjoy the rides. They said, we're looking at the total customer experience. So imagine putting the total customer experience, your total customer experience, in the middle. And then they said, what are all the different ways that we touch our customers? And they thought, well, let's see, there's parking when you come to park, there's buying a ticket, there's going on the rides, there's dining, there's going into the stores, there's using the restrooms, there's getting information. So all you need to do is say, what we want to do is have the best total customer experience, and then identify all the spots, or the touch points as we call them, where you are touching your customers. Now, the rest is easy. All you have to do is assign somebody each of those touch points and let them put a team together to figure out how to make that touch point world class. Now, let's go back to Disney. You might ask, how would you make parking world class? I mean, there's a big parking lot, there's stripes on the parking lot, and you put your car between the stripes. How would you make it more world class than that? Well, just listen to this. Imagine coming into Disney with your family at, say, 9 o'clock in the morning. You're very excited. Everybody's excited to go to Disney. You leave your car. You have a wonderful day in the park. At the end of the day, you come out, and what's the #1 problem that people have? They can't remember where they left their car. So you're kind of embarrassed, and you walk up and say, I can't find my car. And the Disney people are saying, excuse me, sir. And you say, I can't find my car. You're a little embarrassed. Well, they know exactly how to solve this problem. They say, when did you arrive? And you say, about 9 o'clock. And they say, well, your car will be in Mickey's section between rows E and G. And you are sitting there saying, how did you know that? Were you here when I came in this morning? Did you have a videotape? Do you have a photographic memory? No, 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 no. It's simple. It's a process. They simply time the beginning and the end of each line when the cars come in. And so they know, if you give them approximate time, exactly where your car will be. It's routine to them. It's a process. But for you, it's magic. What's the second problem that happens when you go to get your car? Well, you've locked your keys in your car. Now you're really feeling stupid. You're going, you're really mumbling, I can't find my car. They say, sorry, sir, I can't find my car. Well, they have this little golf cart that will come up. They put you in the golf cart. They take you to your car. And believe me, these people are better than car thieves. They're in your car in a minute, and you have the keys in your hand. And again, you're saying, this is magic. It's not magic to them. It is a process that they've designed to create customer delight. Last year in Disney World, how many people locked their keys in their car? 19,000. So this is not a new problem for them. Now, let's look at another organization that creates lasting customer enthusiasm, and that's First Direct. First Direct is a banking organization in England, and they're only about 6 years old. They came from their mother company, Midland Bank. And as the name suggests, direct, they engage in direct banking. So you can bank over the phone or using your computer. And they are a very, very successful company because here's how they started their company. Not unlike Saturn, what they did is they said, what do our customers want? And they went out and they did a survey. And you remember in the focus, when it's find out what your key customers want, they discovered their customers want 4 things. Customers wanted speed, they wanted convenience, they wanted value for the money, and they wanted quality of service. As a result, First Direct designed an organization that creates those 4 things that customers value. And they deliver it every time, without fail. As a result, what has happened is that when the latest survey was done, or a recent survey was done, of the service provided by banks in England, if you could see this chart, it's amazing, because all the banks are here and First Direct is up there. All the banks are here and First Direct is up here with its satisfaction. And if you remember that chart about satisfaction and retaining customers, this means that First Direct will be a highly successful, fast-growing, profitable organization with loyal customers. Now, I'd like to just share one more piece of information with you that you can use to apply in your own organization. And this is called the value orientation frame. And here, this came from our research several years ago in different parts of the world where we were able to interview customers in 6 different industries and find out what was important to them. What were they really looking for? And you know they're looking for many things. But among some of the things they were looking for is they would have a need for information and a need for a relationship. Now, a need for information means, tell me the information. Give me what I need to know about your organization and your products. I want the specifications. Show me the materials and the sheets. A need for relationship is a little different. A need for relationship is the person who says, look, you know your products and services better than I do. Let me tell you what my problem is, and you offer me the solution. You see the difference? Give me the information, I'll make the decision, versus tell me what, I'll tell you what my problems are, and you come with a solution. So let's look at a need for information that could be low for high and a need for relationship that could be low or high. If a person has a low need for an information and a low need for relationship, then the relationship is a transactional relationship. Best example of this would be a vending machine. You want to buy a Coca-Cola, you put the money in, you press the button, you get your Coca-Cola, and there's not a lot of information that's exchanged and certainly not a relationship going on there. The internet or e-commerce certainly is another area where it's much more transactional. Not a lot of need for information, not a lot of need for relationship. But let's say a person has a high need for a relationship. I'll give you an example. I'm a skier. I like to ski. A couple of years ago, I was buying a new pair of skis, and I went into the ski store, and this gentleman, salesman, started showing me all the skis and talking about the technical aspects of lamination and torque and twist. And finally I said, stop, time out, no more. And he finally stopped, and I said, look, here's where I ski, here's how often I ski, here's how well I ski, and here's what I want my new skis to help me do that I'm not doing very well now. Which ski should I buy? He said, that one. I said, wrap it up, we're going to go. You see, the problem was he was treating me like an information buyer when in fact I was a relationship buyer. I didn't care about lamination, I just wanted to ski better. Now, I'm also a percussionist. I play the drums. And when I buy drums, I am an information buyer. I want to know all about the specifications. There's a big clue here to being with your customers. The same customer will be in a different quadrant, relationship, transaction, information, or when they're both strong, partnership, depending on what he or she is buying. The other important factor here is that when we did our research, we found that about 25% of the customers went into each quadrant. In other words, a transactional buyer, a relationship buyer, an information buyer, or a partnership buyer. And what that means is if you are talking to your customers about being their partner, it's not unlikely that 75% of the people you're talking to don't want to be your partner. And that's actually good news, because when you're focusing, you can't have everybody be one of your partners. So pick the ones who want to be your partner or the ones you want to have as partners and work on them. That's the focusing framework. It's wonderful for salespeople to use in assessing their customers and where they are in those 4 quadrants. I hope it's helpful. I'd like to end this segment with a quote from Jim Taylor at Gateway 2000, the computer company. And it's quite a profound quotation. He says, building a brand is about consistency. Every company, once it assumes a brand identity, has to live with the moral consequences of that identity. A brand is a promise, and you have to keep your promises. There's no difference between what we sell and who we are. Contact leadership is the 5th strategy. Contact leadership, the key to success. What is contact leadership? Well, I'll give you 2 examples. It's being in contact with both your customers and your employees, your people. John Chamberlain, the CEO of Cisco, very famous, fast-growing company, spends over 50% of his time with customers. And Sam Walton, when he was building Walmart, used to tell his executives, you have to spend 3 days a week in the stores. And they said, but Sam, how can we do our jobs? And he said, that is your job, contact leadership. Darrell Hartley Leonard, when he was president of the Hyatt Hotels International, said, most employees want to do a good job. How they perform is simply a matter of who they work for. I think that's one of the most important aspects of leadership that any leader could talk about. Let me read that again. Most employees want to do a good job. How they perform is simply a matter of who they work for. We believe that. Most employees come to work every day and want to do a good job. They want to make a difference. They want to have work that is meaningful. They want to help out. That's true for most employees. And when they don't, usually it's not about the employee, it's about the leader. At PNC Bank in the United States, they've done some research, and they said, sure, we want to have profitability. We want to have a profitable organization. What will lead to that profit, you won't be surprised to hear from me, is customer enthusiasm. So there's a link between profit and customer enthusiasm. We've already seen that in this video. Now, What gets customer enthusiasm is employee enthusiasm. So now we have profit, customer enthusiasm, employee enthusiasm. And where would you think the employee enthusiasm comes from? Effective leadership. That's why when I wrote my first book, The Customer-Driven Company, in 1991, and my second book, Customer-Centered Growth, in 1996, the one chapter that I repeated was about leaders and leadership, because it is the key to success. Let me talk about a couple of aspects of leadership. The first one is what I call a cultural moment of truth. Very important concept in leading. And a cultural moment of truth is that moment when, as a leader, and we all do this day in and day out, you have a decision to make. And whatever decision you make actually is going to influence the culture or the climate of the organization you build. It's going to affect what it's like to live and work there. Give you an example. I've talked about Saturn, and a few years ago I had the privilege of making a video seminar with Fortune magazine, and I had an opportunity to go to Saturn, where they actually build those cars, and meet with everyone, all the executives and some of the employees who were out in the manufacturing plant. One of the people I talked to was Skip LaFoe, who was the president of Saturn at that time. And I asked him, I said, Skip, have you ever had a moment of truth that challenged you and challenged you to live up to your values? Now remember, the number one value of Saturn is we are committed to creating customer enthusiasm. And he said, yes, we did. Right after we announced and brought our car on the market, we had the worst thing possible happen. We had to have a recall. We had to bring the cars back because the producer or the supplier who gave us the coolant for those cars had too much acid in the coolant, and the gaskets were burning out of the motors. The motors were freezing up, and the cars wouldn't work. It was an awful problem, he said. Embarrassing. Here we are trying to create a world-class automobile, and the first thing we have to do is recall 1,850 cars. Well, we had a meeting to decide how to solve this problem. And we had three options. One option was to bring the cars in, clean out the engines, put new seals and gaskets on, and send them on their way. Option number two was to recall the cars and replace the engines and send the cars on their way. Option number three was to recall the cars and replace the cars. Obviously, option number three was the most expensive. It was a $35 million decision. Within 20 minutes, the executives in that company decided on option three, to replace the cars. And the reason they did, as Skip LaFoe said so articulately, we had a decision to make. Were we going to live up to that value of creating customer enthusiasm or not? And once we decided that was the value that was going to guide us, the decision was hard, but it was an easy decision to make. That's what a cultural moment of truth is. And you leaders out there, I would suggest day in and day out, you have little cultural moments of truth, and it's very important to be conscious about the impact that your decisions and behaviors have on creating the culture of an organization. Research that we've done in our organization at the Forum Corporation into what makes effective leadership came up with 4 key factors, and I'm going to describe each. One is a passionate connectedness to the business. A passionate connectedness to the business. And I think a really good example of that would be Larry Bossidy, who is the CEO of Allied Signal. And when he first took over Allied Signal, in the first 60 days, he visited over 5,000 customers and employees. Imagine that. The first 60 days on the job, he didn't stay in his office. He didn't look at the numbers. He didn't talk to the financial people in the financial community. He went out and was a contact leader by meeting with over 5,000 customers and employees. That's a passionate connectedness to the business. The second one is a deep commitment to creating meaning. And I'm going to read you 3 stories of 3 different leaders here, because I think these stories will tell you much more than I could when I talk about our research. What you're going to hear is the evidence of having led very effectively. So let me give you an example of creating a deep meaning in an organization. And the first executive I want to talk about is Charlie Idle, who was the CEO of Interface, a large tile manufacturer, industrial tiles. When he was at Interface, he has actually turned around 4 or 5 companies, And he joined Interface from a company called Collins and Aikman. And here's what he wrote in a book that he created. Leaving Collins and Aikman was a traumatic experience because of the relationships that I had with the people, not just management, but rather the people on the shop floor. The name Yanette Hackney may not be familiar to most of the readers of this book, but I can assure you I will never forget Yanette as long as I live. She's a long-term employee of Collins and Aikman. She, along with more than 100 associates, or employees, graduated with her GED on company time. Now, in the United States, that meant the company paid her to finish her high school education. A few hours before my departure, Yanette came into my office with a gift, actually several gifts. She began the conversation by holding up her paycheck and saying, "This is the most money I have ever made in 1 year. Thank you." The next thing Yanette did was present me with a silver dollar encased in cardboard and plastic, implying it was very special. In fact, it was special because the date on it, 1939, was the year she was born. She explained that her mother had given it to her as a small child and told her to rub it every day for good luck. She handed me the coin with one hand and proudly displayed her company-inscribed ring in the other, and I'll never forget what she said. "I love you, Charlie. Thanks for all you've done for me. Please rub this coin every day and come back and get us." Now there's a leader who's clearly created meaning. So the first one is a passionate connectedness. The second one is a deep commitment to creating meaning. The third success factor for leaders is the ability to mobilize your people. Here I want to go to the Philippines, and I want to tell you about Robbie Delgado. Robbie Delgado is an extraordinary leader, and he is the leader of one of the most successful and largest companies in the Philippines. On his birthday, his employees sent him this letter. This is exactly what it says. Dante Gabriel Rossetti, the famous 19th century poet and artist, was once approached by an elderly man. The old fellow had some sketches and drawings that he wanted Rossetti to look at and tell him if they were any good, or if at least they showed potential talent. Rossetti looked them over carefully. After the first few, he knew that they were worthless, showing not the least sign of artistic talent. But Rossetti was a kind man, and he told the elderly man as gently as possible that the pictures were without much value and showed little talent. He was sorry, but he could not lie to the man. The visitor was disappointed, but seemed to expect Rossetti's judgment. He then apologized for taking Rossetti's time, but would he look at just a few more drawings, these done by a young art student? Rossetti looked over the second batch of sketches and immediately became enthusiastic over the talent they revealed. "These," he said, "oh, these are good. The young student has great talent. He should be given every help and encouragement in his career as an artist. He has a great future if he will work hard and stick to it." Rossetti could see that the old fellow was deeply moved. "Who is this fine young artist?" he asked. "Your son?" "No," said the old man sadly. "It's me, 40 years ago. If only I had heard your praise then, for you see, I got discouraged and gave up too soon." Dear Mr. Delgado, like the old man, all of us have inherent talents, but it takes a lot of motivation, training, and discipline to harness them. And many times we need reconfirmation from those who are themselves already accomplished and successful to keep us going, most especially during difficult times. Thank you, sir, for all the opportunities you make available to us, enhancing what we have and in acquiring what we lack. And thanks for allowing us to not give up too soon. Happy birthday, sir, from all of your NWT employees. What else can I tell you about leadership when you read letters like this? Extraordinary. So the passionate connectedness, the deep commitment to creating meaning, the ability to mobilize, and the last one is to spread the goodwill throughout the entire organization, to be a cheerleader. This is a wonderful story. It's about Southwest Airlines CEO Herb Kelleher, and he's been written about a lot because he's very effective. Southwest is one of the only airlines, if not the only airlines, that has been profitable for over the last 20 years. Major airline. And in the United States, there's something that we call Bosses Day. It's when the bosses are saluted or celebrated. We also have Employees Days and Secretaries Days, but this is you know, when the bosses can puff up a little bit and be celebrated. On Bosses Day, 16,000 employees, all of the employees of Southwest Airlines, created a tribute to Herb Kelleher. And I want to read you the tribute. Southwest Airlines tribute to Herb Kelleher for remembering every one of our names, for supporting the Ronald McDonald House, for helping load baggage on Thanksgiving, for giving everyone a kiss, and we mean everyone, for listening, for running the only profitable major airline, for singing at our holiday party, for singing only once a year, for letting us wear shorts and sneakers to work, for golfing at the Love Classic with only one club, for out-talking TV commentator Sam Donaldson, for riding your Harley Davidson into Southwest headquarters, for being a friend, not just a boss. Happy Bosses Day from each one of your 16,000 employees. Now, what's incredible about this story isn't just that this tribute is so beautiful to a leader, spontaneous from all of his employees. What's really incredible about this story is how he received this tribute. Because these same 16,000 employees took their own money and bought a $60,000 full-page advertisement in the newspaper USA Today. And when Herb Kelleher woke up on Bosses Day and opened that newspaper, that was what he read. Now that's the mark of a true leader. Well, we've talked about leadership and how important it is, and we've talked about the 5 strategies. I'd like to summarize by reviewing the 5 strategies and leaving you with a couple of thoughts. The first strategy was how to create a laser beam focus. Very important. Second, how to bring the customer alive in your company. The third one was how to improve organizational teamwork. Remember, we talked about lateral listening. The fourth, how to create lasting customer enthusiasm, how to create those apostles. And the fifth is contact leadership, the key success factor. It won't happen without a committed, knowledgeable, and effective leadership cadre. But I've just reviewed these 5 strategies with you, and I've given you some stories and case studies and anecdotes and ideas on how to do it. Now the rest is really up to you. And to help you apply these concepts to your own organization, I would strongly recommend that you take the materials that have accompanied this video seminar and use them in your own organization. Remember, there's the 25-question questionnaire. You have permission to recreate that within your own organization and distribute it to people. Get it back, collect it, and see what your organization says to you about how ready you are to become a customer-centered organization that creates extraordinary loyalty among its customers. I encourage you to do that and have a little fun while you do it. Let me leave you with this final thought. Several years ago, I was talking to an executive from Milliken & Company, which is a very successful global manufacturer of textiles. They have won our country's, the United States National Quality Award, the Malcolm Baldrige Award. They're very successful. They have a wonderful customer reputation and employee reputation. And I said, tell me about your company. And he said the most extraordinary thing. He said, we are a customer satisfaction system. He didn't say we're a textile company. He didn't say we're a global organization. He didn't say we're one of the largest companies in the world. He didn't say we're the winner of the Malcolm Baldrige Award. He said, we are a customer satisfaction system. We manufacture textiles. We produce happy customers. The key to success in creating extraordinary loyalty with your customers is to always think of yourself and behave as if you and your organization is a customer satisfaction system. Being able to be in front of you in this videotape is an honor and a privilege for me, and I thank you for that opportunity. I hope this will be helpful for you.